This episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast is brought to you by BetUS. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Knicks Film School Podcast. My name is Andrew Claudio, aka GMAC, and it is the offseason, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're enjoying as much of the summer as you can. I know for a lot of you, there's no off season. This is just a work day for a lot of you. And we hope that we're keeping you company here on this work day. I hope you were able to enjoy the little mental health week that we took last week, as some of us are on vacations. And as we're getting back to the swing of things, the content continues. And a long overdue conversation is someone that may or may not want to clarify the statement that he made to me not once, but twice, is that the Knicks should not be too worried, or Knicks fans should not be too worried that they'll lose Isaiah Hartenstein to Oklahoma City. Joining me once again from The Athletic and from the Down to Dunk podcast, Mr. Andrew Schlecht. Hello, Andrew. Welcome to another Andrew Pod.
Andrew Pod times 3. Very wrong. One of my first thoughts whenever you started to hear things about it being legitimate was like, oh man, I really messed up with Andrew Claudio and the Knicks Film School audience, but glad to be here again.
If it is any, not consolation, because you got Isaiah Hartenstein. You didn't get the consolation prize. You got one of my, I don't want to say my favorite players. I really enjoyed watching him play for the Knicks and what they turned him into and what he turned himself into this past season was one of the more valuable role players in the league. So you won the grand prize as far as I'm concerned, being able to just throw money at a player. And we'll talk throughout this pod. He may not even start for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But the reality of the situation, if it makes you feel any better, is by the time it actually happened, I was prepared for it. I think a lot of Knicks fans, the day of the Mikal Bridges trade, the reporting came out that this is probably the direction things are headed.
Right.
But we will get into that in a second. My first question for you, sir. You into the movies lately? You seen the movie Twisters at all?
I have not seen Twisters yet. It's on my list, but I have not been yet.
So the movie is about Oklahoma, and I just want to know how real is that? Like, did Isaiah Hartenstein just move to a part of the country and maybe like is second guessing the fact that he just moved to Tornado Alley, and that unless Glenn Powell shows up, which would be the only thing that would convince me to stay in OKC, or is it the 30 some odd $1 million a year that he may potentially be getting over the next 2 years?
It's definitely that. And one, we do have tornadoes like quite frequently. But he also just talked about like the culture of the team. But to me, it's kind of like, well, you already had a good culture and a team that was good. So you're choosing, I want that, but I also would like to have $30 million next year, So I think it's obviously a little bit of, it was definitely both of those things for him. From what I understand, he would not have just gone just for the money somewhere. Like, I don't think that Detroit was like a real option for him. I think it was going to be like a really good basketball environment for him. And, Presti flew to Eugene to meet with him and to kind of pitch him on that. And I think that along with basically the Thunder just saying, hey, we'll give you all of the money we have. We'll give you everything we've got. And which honestly, I've been surprised about almost all of it, to be honest. I've been really surprised that, one, the Thunder would spend that much money in free agency. Two, that a free agent would say yes, that was going to make that much money. That was one of the things that I was skeptical about, just because it's never happened in the history of the Thunder that they've spent that much money on a free agent. So, it's a new era in OKC, I guess.
You're actually hinting at a serious question in the direction I want to go with this, because the conversations we've had in the past about how this would easily be and is now easily the biggest free agent that the Thunder have ever signed. There's the New York versus OKC and the market of it all, the fact that he's going from the biggest market to the NBA to one of, if not the smallest markets in the NBA. You tell me if it's the actual smallest market.
It's not technically the smallest, but when you go to all the NBA markets, it's pretty easy to say that it is. We like to say that we're one of the biggest cities in square miles.
Okay.
But we have to be honest here. It's a very small city.
The last convo we had, we talked about the 4 or 5 blocks that you see the same person on, and I look forward one day to visiting OKC and going down those multiple blocks. The question and direction I'm going with this though is like the Knicks. It sounds like if they had the chance, they would have thrown a bigger bag at Isaiah Hartenstein to make this somewhat competitive. But this seems like it was a perfect confluence of events, that they were stuck with what they could pay him after the first 2 years. My question is this not just a new era for OKC in that they're able to get free agents? Was this like I said, is this just kind of a one-time like perfect storm of things? Or do I never have to hear about big market bias again? Someone just left New York for OKC. Is this a new era in the NBA, in your opinion?
It's hard to say because it's only one time.
Mm-hmm.
I still think that players will favor these bigger markets moving forward, but I think the Thunder, something that is different about the Thunder today, as you know, the Thunder tried to get Pau Gasol to come to OKC years ago when Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook were there. Couldn't get him to agree to come here. Some of it was because of the city. And so I think the city itself is evolving and has gotten better through the years. But I think what NBA players probably know now more than that is that the Thunder organization is top notch. And that's a team that you can trust. It's a team you want to play for. They have a good coaching staff. They have good development. And so I think that is going to be a draw, similar to what San Antonio has become. People don't want to move to San Antonio, but people want to be a part of the Spurs. And so I think it's probably a similar sentence where, do I necessarily want to live in Oklahoma City? No. But do I want to be a part of the Oklahoma City Thunder? Yes. A lot of players have come back and are a part of the organization that have been a part of the team. Nick Collison's like probably the poster child for that. But guys want to be a part of what Sam Presti's doing. And so I think that there is certainly something to that. And also having $30 million doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt.
But I think that I think that it is going to become more of like a San Antonio situation where you're not going to get everybody, but you're going to have a crack at a few of these guys, over the next decade or so.
Well, speaking of having a crack at it over the next decade or so, I mean, look, last year from when we've talked in the past seemed like a bit of an ahead of schedule kind of year. The reason that they didn't go as hard as they potentially could have at the deadline was because this was their evaluation year, and they evaluated, especially after the series against the Mavericks that we talked about. And they've now gone out and gotten Alex Caruso without having to trade a pick, Isaiah Hartenstein without having to trade a pick, and they still have all the picks if they do want to make any type of upgrade or big move going forward. I mean, you tell me. I know that this is a team that once employed Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. Is this the best position the Thunder have ever been in your opinion? Or is it like just really close to that time they had 3 MVPs on their team?
I think you can talk yourself into it being the best position that they've ever been in just because of the extra picks down the road. Because when those Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook teams were contenders, they didn't have any way of really improving the roster other than their own picks. And by that time, it's like the 28th pick in the draft. And so it's not worth as much as they would have been. And so like they were limited in what they could add through the years. In 2014 or 2015, they added Dion Waiters and they added Enes Kanter, just kind of like 2 flyers on guys that had some upside still. that didn't necessarily work out. And that was like their shot at getting some role players. And so now you have all these extra picks down the road. Presti keeps trying to add to that stockpile. I think some of it is for trade, certainly, but I think some of it is too, just some of these picks are going to be in the lottery that they have from other teams. Looking at these Clippers picks in particular over the next 3 years, they control the Clippers picks the next 3 years. And I think that if you can get a player like they did with Case and Wallace, if you can get a player like that on a cheap deal, that's kind of how you survive in this cap environment and not have to sacrifice like a guy like KCP in Denver. Is like you draft good players and you have a chance to draft a lot of good players. They have Nikola Topic, who's not going to play this year. He had surgery yesterday on his ACL, but will come back next year and is a guy that they hope can be like a backup point guard for them. And it could be a high level one if everything works out. So I think some of it is, they're going to be opportunistic with their picks, but they're also going to have the opportunity to pick really good players in the draft moving forward. So they have options, which is what they didn't have the first time around. And now what they need though is like, can these guys be as good as Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook? Can they accomplish the things that those guys did? Because they made 5 Western Conference Finals. They went to the NBA Finals once. This team projects, I could project that they're going to be better than that. They'll make more than one finals, but you actually have to go do it, And so I think they have the potential to be better than that group, but that group accomplished a lot more than people think they did just because they never actually won it all. And so people always kind of talk down to that group a little bit, that they just did never get there. But man, ask Philly how it would feel to have 5 Eastern Conference Finals in the last, 8 years.
I think they'd settle for one at the moment, Andrew. I think they'd settle for one trip to the conference finals after all that losing they did for half a decade. I think and I saw you posted one of the clips from your guys' reaction to the Hartenstein signing. And I think that's where Knicks fans find themselves in a similar situation, but obviously not, because you're going to be able to enjoy the playoffs and summer league going forward. The Knicks just traded all their draft capital going forward. So our trips to summer league will be more of a formality at this point, where it's like, oh yeah, the picks we didn't have and how they're going to play in these summer league games. I can't wait to watch them. The fact that we spent so many years in the rebuilding or just the building stage of this franchise and projecting what they might do, what they could do. And now it's, oh no, we're in contention mode. And I guess my question, are you so tell my audience, how shocked are you that you've now gotten to contender status? They've done 2 moves this offseason and it didn't involve the treasure trove of picks going out. How stunned are you, if stunned at all, that they're able to build this and it didn't take, like the Knicks just did with the Mikal Bridges trade, or like the Clippers did one day with the Paul George trade?
It is pretty stunning. With all the free agency stuff that we've kind of already talked about, they haven't built anything through free agency before. And so to get a player to just come to your team, he's on a deal that it's big, but the years match up with how they want it to be. And then, flipping Giddey for Caruso, I don't think Thunder fans would have thought that you could do that without giving up a draft pick. Josh Giddey is a really talented player, but he is just kind of a tough fit. He was a tough fit in Oklahoma City. I think that he's not going to be the simplest fit in Chicago. I kind of wish that he had gone to a team like Utah or even Washington, where he could just kind of have some time to develop, because it became pretty clear that he just needed more developmental time. And the Thunder really couldn't offer all that much developmental time. It was like, no, you have a role on this team, and unfortunately, the role that they needed to fill was for basically like a 3-and-D plus player. And the things that Josh Giddey does worst are defense and shooting 3-pointers. So it didn't really work out for him.
Right.
But yeah, to flip him for Caruso, who is going to be pretty perfect for this team. I mean, they're going to have point of attack defense for 48 minutes with he and Lou Dort, and then develop in case of Wallace. So I think they'll be one of the best point of attack teams in the league. And then Hartenstein, who obviously the Thunder needed to get bigger in some ways, but being able to add him, you can play double big, you can play him as like the lone center and put Chet on the bench. You just have a lot of opportunities. And I think, Chet played all 82 games last year. I mean, he could do it again, but I suspect that he'll take it easy more so because I think he was a little bit gassed when he got to the playoffs. I think the Thunder my guess is that they'll want to play the long game this year, and that it'll be more about the playoffs than it is about just finding out what you got. And so to me, that means that there will be some games where Hartenstein will just be the lone center on the team, which is fine. Then you have Jay Will backing him up. So they just have a more functional team. They just have a team where you can just throw different looks at Western Conference teams in the playoffs, which they didn't really have. It was like, this is our fastball, and we're going to throw it as hard as we can, and we just hope that it works. Now they have other ways to play, and I think that to me is what is probably the most impressive, is they didn't give up any picks, and now they can play different ways come playoff time when need be. So yeah, the versatility, and the thing about this team that was going to make them better anyways, like I think if they did nothing and they just came back next year, they would be better. It's just the improvement of SGA, J-Dub, and Chet. Like that to me is going to be the thing that drives everything with this team. And now they're just putting guys around them that just complement what they do and allow them to do their jobs in a better way. So that to me was always going to be the biggest thing with this team. And, adding Caruso and Hartenstein, I think kind of supercharges that to a degree.
So first of all, it's the most impressive part for me that it took no picks and that they still have draft capital going forward, still have that optionality going forward, that if they built this through the draft and through free agency, they had nothing to do with a big swing or a big trade that came down the road. And now a quick word from our friends at BetUS.
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
You just talked about the rotation. I think it's the most curious part for me. Did they just sign and trade for 2 backups? So based off of your projection, you're much more informed perspective of the Thunder than I have. What's their opening night starting 5?
I think it's either Caruso or Hartenstein, which sounds funny because it's like it's either a 7-footer or a guy who's 6'5".
Right.
Right. And I don't really know what they're going to do, to be honest. I would guess it would be Caruso that starts and Hartenstein coming off the bench. The thing about Hartenstein, like he did start for the Knicks down the stretch, but he's been a career backup. So I don't think that there's going to be any like big issues there with him coming off the bench. We asked him about his role whenever he did his opening presser here in OKC, and we talked to Presti about it before too. And he said that like they don't promise roles, they just promise environment, which is like a very Sam Presti thing to say.
Okay. And
so Hartenstein talked too about just how he didn't really have any expectations for what that was going to be like. But he was just here to get better and to play basketball. But
imagine going to any job and that being the first day of orientation. Like your first day at the Athletic. We don't promise role, we promise environment. Like you're going to be able to write. It's like, yeah, but about what? Like if you're working at a coffee shop, it's like, we don't promise role, just the environment's going to be great. All right. Am I at the register? Am I on drinks? Or am I cleaning? Like what? No, Isaiah Hartenstein, if we pay you enough, apparently, you can promise environment and not role,
Right.
apparently. Man.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do as far as like starting him. I could see a world where they start him and Chet together and then they sit Hartenstein early on and then give Chet, some small, like not small ball five, just give him minutes at the five alone for a while. My guess is they liked the way that it looked with Chet at the five, adding a better defender and a better shooter in Caruso. To me, that is like, hey, this is how we have played. This is how we're going to play moving forward. We have J-Dub at the 4, with Caruso at the 3. Like basically, he and Dort will play the wing, and then Shea as the point guard. I think like that works. I think that you have enough shooting there. They give enough creation there, and then they'll certainly play some with Chet because I think you want to maximize Hartenstein, and you also want to see what Chet looks like defending on the wing, because I think he can do it. And so I think you can play these kind of jumbo weird lineups that involve both of them. And I think it works because they can both pass. I don't think like you're going to be hurt for spacing. Also, this was interesting because we asked Hartenstein about this. And I don't know what you think about it. We asked him because he shot threes whenever he played. The first year he played for the Knicks, he shot some threes, and then he shot some when he played for the Clippers and shot pretty well. He said he wants to get back to that. And like one of the reasons that he liked Oklahoma City is that he felt like it's a place where he could develop his game a little bit more too. I'm curious, after you watched him all last season, what you think about just his shooting touch and what he could be from the perimeter.
Is he shooting threes as like a floater? Because that's the shooting touch he had last year. He developed this really nice, like 5 feet from the basket floater game that when teams would double Brunson found it just got really good at the pocket pass on the pick and roll. And then Hartenstein wouldn't necessarily take you all the way to the rim. It was this floater. Like, ask Sixer fans about the Hartenstein floater, that it was just like, oh, we've got him beat at the rim. We're fine. And he just floated over him. That first year, he hit a 3 in the preseason. And it was like, oh my gosh, we got a stretch 5 after all these years of Mr. Robinson and Nerlens Noel and Taj Gibson. And it's funny, is Taj Gibson took some corner threes the year before. And it was like, okay, yeah, this is a thing. Taj Gibson's shooting threes, even though not at a crazy rate. That's the only 3 I actually remember Hartenstein hitting that season. I'm sure he hit more during the season. You're telling me that he said and took threes, but
yeah, he took 37.
He took 37. I got to be honest, I don't remember a single one of them. And I think that speaks to how the Knicks just use their centers, that they're rim protectors, they're offensive rebounders. The reason that his role in the offense adjusted a lot this season, and we started to see it toward the end of the season before, but once Mitch went down and it became clear he was the best option to be the starting 5, and then once Randall went down and they just needed to find other ways to create offense besides Jalen Brunson be awesome, Tibbs like just created this offense through Hartenstein. It looked a lot like the Joakim Noah year that Noah finished top 5 in MVP, and he was just running things through Hartenstein as a hub. So I got to be honest, the biggest fear I had going into the offseason, if OKC became an option, was like, they can't necessarily play 5 out, him being a shooter, but you could run the offense through him, like with SGA off the floor. If you wanted to, he's really good. He's got that court vision and the creativity available. I don't think you're going to look up one day and he's Brook Lopez, personally. I know he said that. He's interested in developing that part of his game, and he'll have that opportunity on a team that uses their centers differently. I would not project that would happen. Now, I was hoping he would come back to New York, so my projection may not matter at all here. And I'm going to look up, and he's shooting 45% from 3 on 3 attempts a game. Who knows? But I that comment in his, I mean, it made its way through the Knicks world when it happened, which is funny because he spoke so glowingly about Tibbs to our good friend Fred Katz throughout the season, and how like he's never felt more prepared. And I'd argue his time under Tibbs just earned him a $30 million contract, although I want to give him as much credit as possible for how he performed and how he played in earning said contract. Look, I say all of this because I speak on behalf of Knicks fans. We're going to miss him. If I could get your perspective on the Knicks and what they've done, they basically countered losing Isaiah Hartenstein by going all in for Mikal Bridges. You talk about the Thunder being able to throw different looks at teams in a playoff series. I'm hoping Tibbs leans into some small ball and like it's Anunoby is an option as a backup center. Yeah. I've been comparing their roster construction right now to the pre-Kevin Durant Warriors. That's the last time I will mention that the Warriors once had Kevin Durant. I know that is a sore subject at Oklahoma City still. But the fact that they can go Anunoby at the 5 reminds me a lot of Draymond Green at the 5 with Iguodala, Harrison Barnes, Clay, and Brunson, acknowledging that Jalen Brunson is not Steph Curry, or at least 2015-16 Steph Curry. Just your thoughts and your perspective on what the Knicks have created as a response to losing Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yeah, I think the most impressive thing is just the depth that they have at the wing. Like, I just don't know that there's another team that can throw as many competent wings out there. Like Josh Hart and DiVincenzo are coming off the bench, right?
Yep. That's right now. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are really good and would start for a lot of teams. And the fact that you have those guys, along with like the development of Miles McBride, and like they're just going to be really solid. They can continue to just kind of throw stuff at you throughout the entire game. And then I'm so intrigued to see what Julius Randle looks like with this team, because I think that he could help out a lot just because he is a good passer. And I think he can kind of do the stuff that Hartenstein did, but also with like more scoring. And so I think that there's like a really, really high ceiling for this Knicks team just because of the depth. Obviously, like the chemistry and camaraderie too is like a big deal for them, and it's really fun and should be a storyline throughout the entire season. But I do think like that stuff is a little bit underrated in the NBA. Just enjoying the guys that you're playing with. Like, do you guys have fun playing together? The fact that they're willing to sacrifice too just says a lot about what they want to accomplish. Because a lot of the NBA is just kind of a cruel business, like honestly. And the fact that you have guys that are on this team that are the best players on this team that have, with Jalen Brunson leading the way, saying like, yeah, I'll take less money so that we can keep this together. That to me is the key for every good team, is like, who is willing to sacrifice, and in what ways are you sacrificing? Because a lot of times teams break up or teams don't reach their potential just because everybody kind of puts their hands up in the air. Like, I'm not sacrificing, not me. I'll wait for somebody else to do it, but I'm not doing it. And for the leader of the team to step up and do that, I think it shows a lot. And I think that this team, obviously they're really good on paper, but I think that they could actually be more than the sum of their parts too, whenever they get this thing all together. And so hopefully they're healthy. I mean, that's the number one thing, right? It's just like health. Like, can they go into the season healthy and then get into the playoffs healthy? And if they do, like, watch out. Like, the Knicks could be in the finals next year.
Well, so that's that thought. The New York Knicks in the NBA Finals in my lifetime again. The hope that I have is, and look, I'm coming off of, I think we do this a lot as sports fans, is we assign the most recent thing that happened to, that's like what you can expect every season, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, like every season's different. Every season plays out in its own unique way and tells its own story. But like 2 years ago, I was like, oh no, the Knicks have too much depth. I don't know if Tibbs will necessarily deploy the right lineups. And that's not even a shot at Tibbs, but I was like very frustrated during that Miami series 2 years ago that he had these RJ Josh Hart Julius Randle and a center lineups out there, and the spacing was just atrocious. And then last year, I'm watching him go to the Josh Hart at the 4 with DiVincenzo, Deuce McBride, and Brunson with Hartenstein. And it's like, oh, there's space everywhere. you know, like this is actually awesome what's going on. And the injuries became such a story that, you know, some narratives about Tibbs and overplaying players existed. Well, now they're built to sustain 25 to 30 missed Anunoby games because now you got Mikal Bridges. They're built to sustain another potential Julius Randle injury because they can go positionless like they did last year with Anunoby or Bridges or Hart at the 4. Where they're not built to sustain an injury is the Mitchell Robinson of it all, which is it's the biggest question so far that I have, which is why. Look, Tibbs, I thought that last year, in my opinion, was his best coaching job that he's done in his career. That's any Bulls year. Brunson turning Brunson becoming an MVP candidate helps, but the fact that they sustained the injuries that they did and still won 50 games and were a 2 seed was just so impressive that I think now that you're giving him options again, and there's 3 playoff starters now as your bench unit, I think it's now set them up, like you said, there could be a ceiling of running into Isaiah Hartenstein in the finals next year and seeing who, man, could we be doing Andrew pods during the finals next June?
That's the dream.
Would be insane.
That's the dream right there. That'd be amazing.
I would hate every second of it because it's the pressure of the finals, which you have all these trips to the conference finals that you're used to. That
right.
Another team that hasn't been to the finals or the conference finals since the year 2000 is the New York Knicks. So, you know, and I think and I'll wrap up here. That's the craziest part about, like, when I talk to other fan bases and I talk to other teams and content creators, it's like there's a part of me that's just so happy to be here and be part of the conversation again. I obviously want to win, and what the Knicks have built competently, like, there's an expectation on this year, but there used to be this like, oh yeah, like I'd love to just make the playoffs and make a second round. Well, now I have to think in 4 rounds. Like I have to think in like, is this team built to win multiple playoff rounds? This isn't like, I'm not making any vacation plans for May or June anymore because it's in play and not crazy to say that there's a June Knicks game potentially in the future. And as somebody who's gone through multiple rebuilds, I'm assuming that it's a welcome surprise, maybe not necessarily surprise, but a welcome expectation that the Thunder have arrived at that point too, right?
Yeah, no question. Yeah, we used to have a vacation every May. Not anymore. We got to push that back.
Yeah, summer league's now the vacation.
Yeah,
which
actually,
is anything but a vacation because we're working when we're out there. Yeah, right. I'm annoyed I didn't get to. I know Vegas was really hot, so anytime I could be inside, I would. But we didn't get to run into each other out in Vegas.
I know. I was very disappointed. I was disappointed. I felt like I was only there for like 4 days, which feels like 3 hours and also 3 years at the same time. So,
do you remember the text you sent me when I told you how long I was going to be there? That I was, because I told you I went there from Monday.
Yes.
First Monday to the following Wednesday, and because there's a storm that hit New York, I actually had to stay an extra day. So it ended up being 11 instead of 10 days. And I remember I was like, yeah, I'll be there from the 7th to the 17th. You're like, that's a lot of Vegas. And Andrew, I can happily report, or maybe unhappily report, it was a lot of Vegas.
It's a lot of
Just a lot of Vegas. Andrew Schlecht of the Down to Dunk podcast, and maybe an extra in the movie Twisters 3 coming out in 2 years. I do hope you enjoy that movie. I hope it's not like the way I view all the Avengers movies that destroy New York, or Independence Day that destroys New York, or all these movies, these disaster movies that destroy New York. Twisters ends up being that that relationship to Oklahoma City, where it's like, oh, the rest of the country just thinks all there is tornadoes. Some ignorant New Yorker comes on and asks me if there's tornadoes. Yes, totally. There's tornadoes everywhere. I do hope you're able to enjoy that movie when you see it. And enjoy Isaiah Hartenstein as you watch him play for your basketball team. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know once again where they can find you and all your stuff.
You can follow me on Twitter at Andrew K. Schlecht. You can go listen to Down to Dunk on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and then go check out the Athletic NBA show. We'll have 2 episodes a week until we get to the start of the season, and then some fun announcements coming there in October. So stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned. You and I believe your co-host is a friend of the pod over at the NBA show over at the Athletic. And I don't want to say his name. I've already said his name on the pod, but he's got enough plugs from us.
We don't need to say his name.
We don't need to talk about him. He's like Bruno. Yeah. We don't talk about Bruno or Fred Katz. Thank you, Andrew, as always, for linking up with me. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back with more of the Knicks Film School podcast in the not too distant future. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to the Knicks Film School podcast. This episode was once again presented by BetUS.